Welcome to On Leadership, a Holy Cross conversation about confidence, humility, and community. Sponsored by the Holy Cross Leadership Council of New York. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career and Professional Development at Holy Cross, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's presentation. A Holy Cross education calls its graduates to be people for and with others. This call is even more important for alumni in leadership roles. I'm thrilled to welcome tonight's featured speaker, Mike Hayes, who will share cross-cutting stories and lessons of both success and failure that he learned as a SEAL, White House Fellow, and C-suite executive. A true Crusader at heart, he credits Holy Cross for instilling in him the spirit of service that drives him to strive for excellence in everything he does. Now it's my pleasure to hand things over to Chris Lober, Chair of the Holy Cross Leadership Council of New York, to introduce tonight's speakers. Welcome, Chris.
Great, thanks, Maura. Hi, everybody. Before we get into the presentation, I'm just going to do a little background and plug for the Leadership Council for those who might not know about it. Leadership Council is something that was founded back in 1997 by a group of New York-based alum. And through the time since and the events that we've done since, we've been dedicated to helping Holy Cross grads, Crusaders all around the New York metro area develop networks. We create and we finance internship opportunities for students. We mentor and we connect people who are at the mid-range of their career, and we harness the skill and the support of the most prominent alum of the school. The mission overall is to raise Holy Cross's profile within the New York business community, and also to get our graduates together, try to develop that community and create this dynamic business network. So the way we do that, well, one of the ways in which we do that is we have a major fundraiser every year. It's our annual dinner. Thanks to COVID, we haven't had it for 2 years, but that's okay because we're coming back strong. The next dinner is going to be May 3rd of 2022. It's at the Pierre Hotel in New York, which is recently redone, so it's going to be even better than before. And Frank Falaccio is going to be our honoree. And the next dinner, something really special, celebrates the 25th anniversary of the founding of the council. So when you take that momentous occasion and you couple it with the fact that COVID will be well in the rear view mirror at that point, we're going to have a lot to celebrate, and we'll have a great party we're going to put on that night. So I encourage everyone to save the date and plan to join us for that. And you'll hear a lot more about that as we get into 2022 and the early parts of next year. But for right now, it is my great pleasure to introduce the speaker of the evening, Mike Hayes, from the great class of 1993. And he's got kind of a boring background, so I'll just kind of hit the highlights. Mike's the former commanding officer of SEAL Team 2, where he led a 2,000-person special operations task force in southeastern Afghanistan. In addition to his 20 years as a SEAL, Mike was a White House Fellow. He served 2 years as the Director of Defense Policy and Strategy at the National Security Council. He's worked directly with Presidents George Bush and Barack Obama. And beyond his military and government service, he is currently the Chief Digital Transformation Officer at VMware. So I'm exhausted just reading that, so I can't imagine how he did all that stuff. He's got a master's in public policy from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and he received his undergraduate degree back in 1993 in mathematics from none other than Holy Cross. And the final thing is he also wrote one hell of a book, and I have a feeling you all are going to see some of that and hear a lot about it tonight. So Mike is joined in tonight's conversation by his good friend Bill Miller. Bill's also the class of 93, and I'm going to hand things off to Bill now to lead the conversation. So thanks, guys, and Billy, take it away.
Thanks for joining us. Chris has stolen a lot of my introduction for you, Mike, but I think it bears some importance to us to sort of highlight a couple of things about you, because as we talked about tonight and what you wanted to stress for people, there are a couple of points of contact that I think you wanted to be clear people had. Yes, you were a Navy SEAL. Yes, you led SEAL Team 2. You're the winner of 2 Bronze Stars, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. You won a Defense Superior Service Medal. You're a current C-suite executive. You've got a startup that you're an entrepreneur of. You started a 501c3 whose sole mission it is to pay off mortgages for the families of fallen soldiers. But I think for those on the phone here today, you are a Holy Cross grad, and you are also a Holy Cross dad. So I know those two things are near and dear to your heart, but you're also a father, son, a brother. You're a lot of things to a lot of people. So I think all of us today are going to learn a lot about your leadership and what leadership means to you from a lot of different areas. And I think I've covered everything on you, but that book that Chris was talking about is right here, and I've got copies behind me for those who can stump Mike later with some questions. But I think it's real important to start off with a simple question for you, Mike, and that just gets to the title, Never Enough. Tell me about the title, Never Enough.
Well, first of all, thanks to Chris and Maura for hosting this, and of course the great College of the Holy Cross and all of this wonderful alumni community. And thanks to you, Bill, for buying every copy of Never Enough and putting it behind you. So I'm tremendously grateful. Now, the title Never Enough can sound very fame and fortune and material good centric, and it's intended to be provocative for a reason. Never Enough is really about just one simple concept: meaning, impact, purpose, and the Holy Cross, foundation of men and women for others, and how we can, use our gifts and our talents and our abilities to pull others up. Bill, you know me well at this point. We go back to our Lehigh days back in 1990, 91, sophomore year so the real thing that drives me is at this point really being passionate about giving back. I've lived a life where I've had hundreds, if not thousands of, once in a lifetime experiences, many of them good, but a lot of them really challenging and tough. Like every SEAL of my era, I've buried far too many friends. Look, I've been, shot at, I've been rocketed, I've been, jumped out of a building rigged to explode. I've been on Skype with my wife and daughter, while we got rocketed one time in Afghanistan, run over by a Carnival cruise liner. I could go on and held at gunpoint and threatened with execution and torture in Peru. And so I've had a lot of challenging days as well. And through all of it, I've learned, and everybody on this call, on this Zoom, knows the expression, to those whom much has been given, much is expected. I've been really fortunate from the good things, but I also find the really hard thing. I find the fortune in the hard things and then try to give back, Bill.
No, I think, and so you've moved right into the topic that I wanted to try to go to next, which I know is near and dear to everybody on the phone, on the Zoom today, I think. And that's one thing we all have in common here, and that's Holy Cross, right? It's life on the hill. And you in the book, you talk a lot about the importance of Holy Cross, the values you learned there, the community you built, you were a part of, and you talk about how those experiences sort of really came to sort of shape a lot of what you did later in life. In particular, talk about the community, talk about spiritual exercises, people like Michael Ford in the chaplain's office. How did HC prepare you for the difficult decisions that you ultimately faced later in life? I mean, how did you get through a lot of the tough times, and how did Holy Cross and you draw upon those experiences?
It's funny. None of us would have predicted when we were, 18 through 21, 22 years old, the way our adult lives would unfold. And, Holy Cross really cemented the foundational people for others and service orientation. When we were freshmen, we recall in '89, we invaded Panama. There was a Holy Cross ROTC SEAL officer that was killed on the runway in Paitilla Airfield, John Connors. He was a WPI student, Holy Cross ROTC. And I right in the chapel there, saw the SEAL community come together in a real memorial, and just see in so many different ways that what being part of a community meant. But you read off, I cringe when people read like resumes or things that I've done. I'm no different than anybody else. We've all just chosen different paths and done different things. But in mine, I'm affiliated with so many different communities at this point, and alumni groups. There is nothing, absolutely no group more special than Holy Cross. It is bar none the best group. I think there are probably some guys who are from '93 who are in my HC Boys chat that has 20-ish people in it and banters all the time. And we just remain really tight. It's all about the relationships. And so, Bill, we all have hard days, and the thing that gets us through our hard days are the friends, many of whom are just from the Hill.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You talk a lot in the book about values and process, and how those sort of play into leadership, and how one can be a leader by espousing the right values and following values, but also the process one uses one uses to get there. And I think you place those two components at the center of leadership for you, and I think they've been important for you. How does the leadership at Holy Cross or any institution, right? I mean, you've been involved with a ton of institutions now over the years. I focus a lot on Holy Cross, but talk about the rest of your experiences too. How does a community engender and embody those two fundamentally sometimes different, right? The process can sometimes run counter to the values we've got. And how do you handle that? How do you be a leader through those times?
Well, I think the first recognition is understanding that the values and these organizations that we hold up take work to hold up. When we're younger, we just assume that the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts, Holy Cross, you name the organization, it just seems like an institution. And just like, it takes the wonderful people who hold these things together. The phase of life that we're in now, it really falls, the obligation falls on us to do the work of pulling these organizations together and doing great things for the world. And I think that recognition grows over time. And the thing that's most important to me about Holy Cross is that it's a beacon and it's a foundation for your adult life. You can always turn back to it and you can always call back. I think we're in this pandemic, like on an absolute basis, it's been a hard year and a half for the whole planet. But the thing to remember is, on a relative basis, there are some of us having a relatively good day, some of us having a relatively bad day. And so how do we those of us who are having a relatively better day, help the people who are having the relatively harder day? And so that's, to me, the kind of values and foundation that Holy Cross really espouses. I was involved in the Big Brother program there, and Father Ford at a hockey match one day tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Michael, you really should spend a week of your Christmas break at the spiritual exercises. You should have had to have signed up, weeks and weeks and weeks ago. It's been sold out forever, but somebody just, pulled out. You're in, you're going." And, you can try to find, so the college just taps you on the shoulder in ways that you can never predict.
Yeah, no, I mean, you took, I think, your experiences in Rhode Island and what happened on the spiritual exercise, you've certainly carried those contemplations you had over those few days of silence into a lot of interesting places. Afghanistan, Central America, you've taken yourself to the White House and situation rooms that I couldn't only imagine what was discussed and what happened. And somehow you sort of, you came out on the other side. What are those experiences? What are those sort of stand out to you and say, I remember distinctly sort of, drawing upon those, my moments on the spiritual exercises when Michael Ford tapped me on the shoulder. I think about that moment and that carried me through. What was it? What do you remember?
Yeah, well, the thing I would say first is that when you're writing a book, once you commit to that, you can't just be the president of your own fan club and write about how cool you are. That's not a book. And so, being open and sharing and talking about things like, we're all imperfect. We're all on the journey together. We're all on the journey to become less imperfect. And so for me, that was one of the things that I wrestled with. And one thing in the book that I talk about that I look back at and say, did I really, I've always had a deep faith, yes, we went to mass at 10 o'clock on Sundays and it was, sometimes, joking and bantering and stuff, but look, we locked in and went to church as a friend group and as halls and different things. And what a fabulous foundation that, of faith that most people from Holy Cross have not. And so as I got older, I always had the foundation, but I look back and say, did I share it enough? Was I open enough about where I drew strength from? And I'll tell you, there are a couple stories in the book, but that I were, to me, absolutely mind blowing. One quick story: my grandfather, who I looked up to quite a bit, who was the professor of naval science for 4 years, 64 to 68, or actually 69, but he was at Pearl Harbor on that day of infamy, December 7th, 41. Just really, taught me a life of service. My grandfather, as soon as I got to Afghanistan, just to be really open, I had a really hard day, 3 or 4 things going wrong. The Taliban had shot 3 kids and were blaming it on us. We had an investigation that if you Google like Mike Hayes and like SEALs, a beating death and a cover up, that was a front page story of the New York Times. I live by my ethics and my values. I would submit I'm the only one that came out of that story okay, without getting into that story. But I've lived that front page of the New York Times kind of test for real. And then also had a personal medical situation with somebody who I love most in the world. And when you feel all this pressure, where do you turn? And so it's really just like always, turn to the man upstairs and ask for help. And in fact, I actually have on my shelf here an unplanned prop, but I have this Bible right here that I flipped to, and just just like my mom taught me to do when I was a kid, just hey, when you need a little bit of guidance, just flip and put your finger somewhere, and I won't ruin the story that's in the book, but there was just really, really pertinent guidance and values in there. So long-winded answer. I'm really, my wife and daughter will confirm I'm really good at these long one-way conversations, but I'd say the short answer to your question, Bill, it really is faith.
Well, Mike, none of us came here today for a short answer from you. We all wanted the long answer. So I'm gonna ask you to sort of expand a little bit. You talk a bunch about your grandfather in the book. I know you had a special relationship with him. For those that haven't read the book or do read the book, I mean, I've reread Rudyard Kipling's If now a bunch of times, and I think there's a lot of valuable lessons, and you had a wonderful relationship with him. Tell me a little more about that. Tell me a little more about your grandfather. Tell me about how he influenced you.
Well, in my growing up, he was a man of example. He never talked about himself. He always talked about how he was helping others and what he was doing for others. And no different than my own parents and my own siblings, it was just a real example of who to be and how to be. Never self-aggrandizing, very understated. And the story you're referring to was super cool because when I was in about 10th grade, my grandfather handed me a framed picture of Rudyard Kipling's If, and on the bottom he said, "Hey, Michael, I had to memorize this when I was a young man, and there are a lot of great words here to live by, and I just want you to have this because whenever you're not sure where to turn or who to be, because this is a great thing to read." Well, he passed away several years later. And then several years after that, I went to Afghanistan and was having one of those really hard days where I couldn't let anybody else see it as the commander, but I went back into my room, I closed the door. And I think it's literally the only day of my life that I would say I felt stressed, like really felt stressed and overwhelmed. And I turned to my email, and in my email was a copy and a paste of the poem If in my inbox from my number 2, who had no idea what was going on with me. And so, just like there would it was just so clearly my grandfather emailing me from heaven. I just really believe it.
No, it's listen, we all have those moments in our lives where someone's reached out and touched you from in a most necessary way, and it's incredible to see that. So and you obviously had a ton of those experiences. There are a couple of themes from the book too that I want to touch on a little bit again, going back to the book, both with, I think, strong roots in Ignatian spirituality. One is you talk about gaining authority by giving it all away. What do you mean by that?
Well, it couples up with leadership is often mistaken for somebody being in the front of the room, looking great and feeling strong and important. What leadership really is to me is being that if you need to. Leaders need to lead, but more importantly, they need to know how to follow and then know when to do which. And so, Bill, to me, it really is about being able to set your ego aside, move away, and see the success and the credit of the team. If you told me, "Hey, Mike, you could go save the day on the operation and win the Medal of Honor for being a hero, et cetera," or one of the guys on your team could, which would you rather have? Like very, very deeply, I'd rather see somebody else do that. I'd rather see somebody else's credit. I just take a lot of pride in seeing others succeed. And then it's also very true that when you're oriented that way, that others for self theme, that the organization's success is your success. And as we get more senior, like nobody pats you on the back and says, "Great job." I can't tell you when the last time, it's been, I don't know, 15 or more years since somebody said, hey, Mike, you did a great job. Like we just need that less as we get older. We need to be the ones doing that for others. And that's really, I think, one of the art forms. And so to me, leadership is really just understanding what motivates people who are around us and accepting, we talk a lot now about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the world, and rightfully so, because everybody should have equal access to every opportunity. Everybody should be treated identically across the globe. And leadership is saying, recognizing the biases we have. And, I tend, we all as humans tend to look across the table when we're hiring and say, hey, that person looks a lot like me. How smart, that person is so smart, let me hire that person. And that's not what makes winning teams. I mean, what makes winning teams is hiring the person who isn't like you, who can add a different perspective, a different set of experiences. And when you understand different people's motivations, for example, like if we really brainstormed it out, people are motivated by the basic same elements. It's some combination of public recognition, quality of life, learning, compensation, and I don't know, just and promotion. Those are 5 things right there. I'm not a person that craves public recognition, but if I'm with the person who craves the public recognition, I have to be careful, because like I'm not wired that way. But how do you say, hey, that's okay that person's different? Well, let me connect the vision of where we're going in the mission that we're doing to what will motivate that person. Because it might not be what motivates me, but leadership is that translation layer between the vision, the desired outcome, and then the person, him or herself.
Powerful. You spent some time as a White House fellow. We've talked a bunch about one of your favorite lines from sort of being a White House fellow. I think it ties into what we're talking about right now. You want to tell everybody one of your favorite phrases you learned from being a White House fellow?
Well, yeah, first, I'd love to just share quickly what the White House Fellowship Program is. I'd love to see Holy Cross put a person in the White House Fellowship every single year. It's really the nation's premier fellowship on leadership and public service. And it's all walks of life, all different backgrounds professionally can apply. As a military officer, you're allowed to apply. And so I put my name in the hat. Thousands of people apply every year. Gets winnowed down to about 90 or 100 people to make regional finals. There's about a day long, 16 or so interviews at regionals. That gets winnowed down to about 32 people. And then you have 3 days of like nonstop interviews from all like national names, people everybody on this call would know. And then 14 fellows are selected. And the criteria that we select for, and speaking now as somebody who helps with the selection process, and I just spoke to this year's class of fellows just a couple of weeks ago, the thing that we look for are people who are not trying to just build their resume, but people who are trying to have real positive impact in the world. And when I was a White House fellow, I still remember, the hardest essay to write, the 200-word essay it's a lot easier to write 1,000 words than 200 words. But one of those 200-word essays was, why do you want to be a White House fellow? My answer was that I don't want to just positively impact people. I want to positively impact people to go positively impact others. Then we have that nonlinear effect on the world. And so once we got into the fellowship, I was tremendously privileged to spend a year with 13 of the smartest people on the planet, and mostly just awesome human beings, great character, great, and like they would be very Holy Cross, very, very Holy Cross. And so in that program, Bill, what you're referring to is a statement that I made that said a White House fellow never lets another White House fellow advocate for him or herself. What I mean by that is that how do we go achieve things, but not because it makes us look taller, or bigger or faster or more or richer or cooler, but how do we go achieve things so that we have a better platform from which to go help others? And so the concept is really, so strike White House fellow and replace with Holy Cross. And that's part of the reason, like what Chris was talking about in the intro. How do we as a Holy Cross community do a better job of helping each other and pulling people up? We're the average of the people we hang out with. So I've always tried to hang out with people who are smarter, faster, stronger, et cetera. And then not so mysteriously, I become.
I'm really sorry I pulled you down.
What's that? Yeah, no. Yeah.
Sorry I pulled you down.
That's why I hang out with you. So that's how we pull each other up as a community. And so how do we could talk about being intrusive in other people's lives, but the point that I'd love to really help us all think about is it's okay to go achieve. But what's your motivation? Your motivation, our collective Holy Cross motivation, is go achieve so that we can help the world, the country be stronger, help our neighbors be happier, help our families be stronger, help whatever that is. That's what Holy Cross is and stands for. But how do we all do it in different ways? People can look at me and say, okay, SEAL, White House Fellow, I'm probably not going to be a SEAL or a White House Fellow. Probably true, but everybody has different gifts and abilities and skills and interests. And so how do we help people find where the ways and the places that they should serve and bring the nation up?
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk a bunch about the ability to bring people up, the ability to sort of pull others up to where you are, where others should be or could be. And I think that's a large part of when you talk about never enough. It's, pulling people up to a level that everybody, should be at or could be at, and giving that sort of example. I mean, you talk about your grandfather in such great words, but you're living that life, Mike. You are living that life of example. That's sort of you make the extraordinary seem ordinary. I mean, we run down your list of accomplishments, but you don't do it for yourself. You've never done that for yourself. And so I go back to the spiritual exercise a little bit, and I think back to sort of gratitude and gratefulness, and think about those sort of important virtues and values that Ignatius placed such a prominence on. And I think there's a question here too from the chat room that sort of comes to the same point. How do you be a humble leader? How does humility fit into all of this?
That's a great question. And I look at confidence and humility as two very different things, and it's important to understand the difference. You see, I'm a very confident person. I know that I've done a lot of things on this planet that very few people can do. At the same time, there's way more that I can't do than I can do. My wife's an incredible artist. And she can also visualize, design things, internal or external design. She can do a million things that I can't do. You can do, Bill, you can do a million things I can't do. But how do we have the confidence in who we are, at the same time, the humility that somebody might have a better idea, or that, that really at its core, we're not arrogant. When I get reverse 360s in the real world, one of the things that always kind of cracks me up is 10% of the people that they interview think I'm the most arrogant person that they've ever met. They see SEAL and Harvard and White House Fellow and blah, blah, blah. None of that matters. If they really get to know me, they'll realize that it's not that the confidence is being mistaken as arrogance, because the humility is really the key point. In striving to be in the back of the room when we should be in the back of the room and seeing others succeed. So it's a really good question. And it's just one of reflection and thinking afterward, am I striking the right balance between fighting for what I believe in and getting my ideas out there, but at the same time being very open that our own ideas may not be the best ideas. We've got to both fight and I say fight in a metaphorical term, but believe in something, try to make that something happen, and then be okay if it doesn't happen.
No, you again, I keep going back to the book. I said it has that important significance over the last, it's interesting. You wrote a book about leadership, and its release came during a pandemic. And I think, it's not God does have a sense of humor, I guess. So I look at it that way. But you talk about when to lead and when to follow in the book as well. And I think that sort of ties into this, this question of being a humble leader at times as well. And there have been times in your life when you've had to follow, and times when you've had to lead. And how are you able to sort of distinguish between those two, given the stress you were under, given the circumstances you were in, sometimes to know when it was okay to follow somebody else and when you had to sort of take the lead and do it yourself?
Yeah. So individuals can fail, organizations can't. So how do we as leaders set that up so that as a system, individual failure will not equal organizational failure? Now, when we're going out on a mission with 30 SEALs in Chora, Afghanistan, where the young girls and women cannot be educated, and we're going to go clear the Taliban out that night, my goal is to not fight fair. How do we don't take any unnecessary risk? We do a little, what I would call in regular terms, a cost benefit analysis to say, is what we're going to go achieve worth achieving? And then if yes, how much risk do we have to take on in order to go do it? That's my job as the commander. And as we get ready to go on something like that, how do you stay calm in those hard situations? And how do you recognize that any sort of fear or anxiety or any sort of negative emotion is simply a distraction to getting the overall mission achieved? It's not easy to do. And I could hear maybe a 23-year-old listener hearing me say that and being like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Totally false. When I was on campus or recently graduated, I wasn't any good at anything. I learned through time to get better and better. And it's really, and that's where, Bill, I think part of the book is like, lean into the hard things. If there's any career advice, it's go try the hardest thing you can try, because then you're either going to succeed or you're going to fail. If you try a really hard thing and succeed, great, go try an even harder thing. If you failed, people sometimes see that as failure. I submit it's only failure. You have to go down the logic tree one more node and say, did you learn or not learn? And it's only failure if you failed and didn't learn. If you failed and learned, you just, and you think about and you compound your knowledge, you feed that back into yourself and you don't make the same mistake twice and you just got better. And so that to me really is the essence of being able to literally have bullets or rockets flying and just be thinking almost like a supercomputer in massively slow time and feeling like, split seconds, like you have hours, because you're just processing every combination and permutation of a three-dimensional problem and saying, here's what I need. And that comes from practice. And there's a natural question of, is it nature or nurture? And I think it's a little of both, but we definitely, we as Holy Cross, we lean into some pretty hard classes on campus. I know math definitely scuffed me up a few times. And, but from all that we grow, and that's that foundation that we all have. We go through an academically rigorous, program. Look, I did Harvard grad school. Holy Cross is 100 times harder than Harvard. It's 100 times I know this is recorded. Holy Cross is a 100 times of a better school than Harvard is.
We'll face the libel suits later. It's all right.
I got a good lawyer.
You got to send me his name. So how do you transition from, as you said, bullets flying around, rockets all over, White House situation rooms? How do you take those experiences? How do you take that stress level and translate that to where you sit now, to the C-suite you're in now, to sort of helping to lead an organization? I mean, how does that work? How do you do that?
It's all the same thing. And this was the biggest struggle, Bill, in the book, was making it relatable. Trying to have people read this book and say, how do I extract the concepts that apply to everybody? And so, I remember in the sit room when in the very beginning of Obama's presidency, there was a guy that got hijacked on a ship. It turned into a movie called Captain Phillips. I've actually never watched the movie, but while it was Barack Obama, a guy Dennis McDonough, who later became the chief of staff, and a guy named John Brennan, who later became the head of the CIA, and me. And the three of them were just watching me with, all the TVs in the sit room and being like, okay, Department of Justice, we're going to have one of two outcomes, live or dead pirates. If we have live pirates, where are we prosecuting them? If we have dead pirates, how are we going to bury them so we don't have a tactical victory and a strategic loss? And I actually didn't. So after Obama was actually sitting in the chair and he said, hey, where'd you come from, man? And I said, hey, don't worry, sir. I was here with the last administration, and I could see his political calculus turning. But anyways, he asked me to stay his whole administration. And so you can hear that story and be like, okay, yeah, it's pretty unrelatable. False. All it is in business is saying, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Let's get everybody aligned around the outcome. And, when I walk into like a C-suite or meeting and I say, hey, what are we trying to achieve? It's really like everybody gets the first 50% like perfectly aligned, but a lot of times there's a little bit of drift around the next 50%. And so how do you coalesce really get clarity on the goal you're trying to achieve? Then idea generation to get the different strategies going to say, what's the best way to go achieve something? And then you execute well, then you get feedback through the whole thing. and you have a culture that welcomes some of the things we talked about earlier. And it's that simple, whether you're trading markets or making paper clips, or you're the SEALs or the White House, it's all the same thing.
So that segues in, as I'm looking at the screen, they're trying to pull questions in and trying to put them in the right order. One of these questions sort of ties in a little bit to this. It's, you've got so much going on in your life, Mike, right? How do you relax? What do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? Like, how do you take the past you've got, which is stressful memories, a lot of great experiences, some tragic experiences too. You're now sitting in an executive suite at a Fortune 500 company doing the things you do there. How do you relax? What do you do? I mean, what advice are you going to give to Mason on, all right, how do you find time to relax? What do you do to unwind? What do you do to keep your head about you?
I'm probably not good enough at it, is the honest answer. But let me tell you, like people, there are synergies across, if you pick the right things in life, they are synergistic. And it's not like when you go from one thing to two things, it's not actually 2x. If you pick the right second thing, it's only 1.1x. You know what I'm saying? Because like the boards that we're all on now, like I'm on the board of a national museum that isn't built for the National Medal of Honor Museum. And now all of a sudden the people you're on the board with are like potentially business partners for something else. And like all of a sudden the world just becomes very small. So if you pick the right things, it's not as many things as it sounds like. And so the art form is in doing the picking. But look, for relaxing, it's long runs, it's wake surfing with the family. We affectionately call our boat 3 captains because me, my wife, and my daughter all think we're all in charge, and I know that I'm not. But we're very fortunate now to be able to get up to the fresh air of Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire and do fun things like that. But I will say one thing with the book, just to make a long answer longer, Bill. For me, the book is a mission. It's really, when you say, how do you relax? Look, I feel the weight of a lot of friends who aren't here, and it isn't easy. And so, when that's why, like, sure, what you're hearing is some passion to pour a bunch of experiences into a book. But, I've been fortunate with this 501c3 that I founded to be able to pay off 5 mortgages so far. I got a lot of money for this book and as an advance. And I've also, through the generosity of other friends, very quietly, no website, no fanfare, like literally just, I have another classmate, Sean Regan, who's on the board with me, a wonderful human being. If you don't know Sean, I know you know, but we go quietly do great things. And Bill, for me, the ability to go fly down to Virginia Beach and sit across the table and look at my friend's wife and say, hey, you don't have a mortgage anymore, is really one of the most powerful things in the world. At Thanksgiving, we were able to tell a woman who lost her husband in the middle of the war in Afghanistan, got back on her feet during the pandemic, and then lost her business during the pandemic. And she and her 4 kids were legit homeless. A woman who lost her husband in Afghanistan and her 4 kids were homeless. How wrong is that? And so to be able to tell her that she has a home now and pay that off, that's my free time. Like, there's nothing I'd rather do, outside being with my family. So anyways, long answer, but that's what gets me. That's why I love. That's how I spend my free time, Bill, doing things like writing.
No, I mean, listen, you exhibit men and women for and with others on a daily basis, Mike. You do. I mean, it's you more than wear it on your sleeve. So, but the definite plug for the book is exactly what you just told people. Like, tell me about what you're doing with the profits of the book. Tell me about what's going on, with the 501c3 and the interplay between that and what's going on with this book. And I'm in no way trying to diminish people's donations to the New York Leadership Council for Holy Cross or the Holy Cross in general. But what you're doing is really amazing work with this, a true act of generosity by writing this book and getting it out there. So.
Well, I also am not the kind of person, all of my profits are going to the 501c3. If I was profiting at all, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, hey, Bill, can you go buy 3,000 copies behind you? For me, another thing I learned, I think it took me a while to learn this, but growing up in the SEALs, life was either strength or perceived strength. You never ever show weakness. And man, has the world evolved since then, and I think in a really helpful way. I took over, we lost 11 SEALs on June 28th, 2005. It turned into a movie called Lone Survivor. I started to read the book, and literally on page one, I just had tears streaming down my eyes. They were all friends of mine. I just couldn't even, it starts with knocking on a door, and I just couldn't do it. So anyways, I even lost my train of thought because I have like memories that aren't great from that. But so anyways, I totally turned myself around on that one, Bill.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Listen, so I mean, I'll help you segue to something different then. I mean, but a lot of leadership is about mission, right? It's about the mission that you're sort of leading people towards, and sometimes some tough consequences happen as a result of that, of where you're leading people in the mission that goes on. And it's, somewhat of what you're talking about right now, what your mission is with this book. And I guess it comes back to like, how do you know that sometimes the mission you're leading people to, how did you handle that? That sometimes the mission you're leading people to may not end with good results for everybody you left with.
Yeah, well, while you were talking, I remembered where I was. So,
we go back there and then
so let me just finish that thought, and then I'll come to that. But what I was going to say is asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And so where the SEALs evolved to now, with a lot of help from some people who are more experienced, and then through a lot of like painful days, is that we recognize asking for help is strength, not weakness. And that's why even now I feel very comfortable asking my Holy Cross family, hey, give me a hand with this book. It's freaking $20 on Amazon. Do your Amazon review, blah, blah, blah. Like that, like that's not an easy, like I didn't grow up having it being very comfortable asking for help. If I can do anything now, it'd be helping younger people understand that is not only okay, but it's welcomed. And then, so that was the rest of that other answer, Bill.
My next question is about mission, and sort of how do you, when you know sometimes the mission you're on is a tough one. How do you prepare for that? How do you prepare those that you're leading? How do you sometimes follow? You weren't always a leader. Sometimes you were following a mission you knew could be challenging.
Yeah, this is a great question. Look, as a leader, everybody talks about Tom Brady playing to age 45 and whatnot. Like at 41, I was going out on missions, not every night like my guys were, but you got to get out there and bear the same risk as everybody else. I mean, I was in gunfights at age 41, so getting into a vehicle or getting on a helicopter, getting ready to go into some unknown situation. I've written literally hundreds of emails to my wife and daughter, trying to find the right balance so that they wouldn't get freaked out that I was going to get ready to go do something hard. But at the same time, if something happened to me, that they'd know how much I loved them, I would literally, the number of times I've wondered in my head if I would even know that I was dead is countless. Like I always wondered, like, if you get hit with a roadside bomb, do you even know that you died? Like, I mean, I've gotten in a car and ridden over hundreds of miles of roads like that. And that's not normal. I remember flying back to Virginia Beach and landing and being on the bus that took us from the airport and the military airport in Virginia Beach back to the SEAL team, and having having the most emotional reaction of being like, oh my God, these roads aren't even going to blow up on me. It's that serious. And so the other thing I would say, so that's the individual SEAL on the mission. Then there's the leader of the whole SEALs deciding what operations do you go on. My organization's mission was to stop bad people from doing bad things to good people. And look, I was the last person that decided if we drop bombs on people or buildings or whatever. And that's a decision that you do not want to get wrong. You never want to harm anybody that shouldn't be harmed. And I mean, I love the topic of decision making and org design, and all that's outside of the scope of this conversation. But when there was one particular night, and I had this general tell me, hey, we had dropped a bomb and killed 12 Taliban, and that were definitely Taliban, no question about it. This general said, hey, get back in there and make sure you didn't kill any civilians. And I'm like, what? Like, no freaking way. There's a reason we didn't go in there and do that ourselves, and that we hit them with an airstrike. The reason was because the road was full of improvised explosive devices. And And he said, no, get in there and go check it out. And I was like, no. And so when you say no to the general, that's a potentially career ending decision. And so look, all of us in different times in our careers, sometimes just need to put it out there. And when somebody's telling you to do something that's against your values or your morals or your ethics, you cannot do that. So I said no. The general ended up saying, yes, you're going to go do that. And when I said no, he said, okay, well, we'll deal with that later. I'm going to go tell the Afghan, my counterpart with the Afghans, to go check that area out. 3 Afghan vehicles went down to check out that area. 2 of them were vaporized, and there were 4 Afghans, if not 5 Afghans killed. I've had lots of great and terrible days, but one great day was the very next day, flying to the Army Green Beret outstation that would have gone and ridden over those roads, and sitting down with these 12 guys and having them look at me, and just the 12 of them and the 1 of me, and saying, hey, sir, there is not another officer that we have ever met who would ever make the decision that you just made. And 6 of us are here in this room today because of your courage and your decision-making. And to these guys, it was just another crazy day in Afghanistan. To me, I sat there, my throat was like, I was trying so hard not to look like I was crying. I was like so moved, like, and so, like these things that you don't even fully process until later in life but anyways, the point, Bill, is have the conviction to not deviate from your morals and your ethics and your standards. So even when it's at an initial cost to you, life is long, like things will work out over the long run. Never, ever deviate.
No, it's a powerful message for the younger alums, for the older alums, for friends of Holy Cross that are on this Zoom right now. I think it's real powerful. And I think sort of taking that, being true to your values and your core, like, you've got a daughter now at Holy Cross. Holy Cross still true to its mission. What are you seeing now in the leadership of Holy Cross? Are you feeling the same sense of community? You feeling the same sense of pride in the purple that you did when you were there?
Look, it's been a hard year. Let's set this COVID year aside. I feel more pride than I ever have. Like I propped, I don't know if you guys, I can't point straight ahead. That picture right there is my great-great-grandfather, class of 1910, who actually held the record for the most baskets scored in a game. He's in the varsity Hall of Fame for basketball, baseball. He had the most baskets scored in a game until a guy named Bob Cousy broke his record in what was that, 52, I think it was. And so, but then, my dad went to Holy Cross. My 3 siblings went to Holy Cross. My daughter goes to Holy Cross. Like we're a purple family. So I feel more pride than ever. I feel more weight on my shoulders to kind of help. How do we all help each other in this community to make this community stronger? We have a lot of well-placed people. Like I think there's probably a couple people that I work with here, hopefully maybe on this call, or like somebody reached out on LinkedIn just today. I was sent a note to my general counsel saying, hey, I've got a Holy Cross class of 09 person that applied for this role. Can you please make sure you look at this resume very closely? I know this is a great person. How do we, Bill, you're always helping people. You're always helping me. You're always helping others. Like, how do we do a better job of strengthening the fabric and the network? I've had these near-death experiences many times. I have perspective. My perspective is that we have an opportunity to constantly improve the strength of our Holy Cross fabric and do more for others.
No, I think so. I mean, we're coming sort of towards the end here, Mike, but I think, despite the stress, despite the tragedy you lived through, despite, the death and destruction you've seen, you've lived a life filled with hope. You've given me hope. You've given so many people hope. The hope you've given to the 6 families you've already done this for, which you're going to do with a lot more. I know. I think it's amazing, but you've been through a lot in your life. You've seen a lot of activity. What's the unifying thread? What keeps you going? What gives you hope? We started this thing talking about process. So, where do we go from here? What do we do?
Well, I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago, so I've lived the first third of my life now. There's so much to go do. It's how do we find the areas where we can make the best impact? you know, I've hired, like many of us our age, I've hired, you know, hundreds of people. And I say, look, there's really three circles that matter. There's what gives you energy, what are you good at, and what does the business need? Now, the business, you can replace that with whatever relevant word is analogous, but the only thing in life is to thread that needle, thread that middle of that Venn diagram of those three circles. Yes, math major, my big time geometry just came back to me, but you know, how do we find the intersection between what gives us energy and where we can make the impact for our great nation? You know, gross domestic product, if we go back to Econ 101, is just labor times productivity. Labor is just birth rates and immigration policy. What really moves the needle is productivity. And so how do we help this nation be more productive? Because with more GDP, we can, you know, buy more seals. Look, we're commodities. At the end of the day, yeah, special, but commodities. There are a lot of special commodities. With more GDP, we can buy more healthcare, more education, more, care for the elderly, whatever it is, or we can pay down more debt, whatever it is, we have more options. And so how do we play our role and our part to help amp up GDP so that we pull the whole nation and frankly, the whole globe up? That to me is the art form for me is like, there's no single impact that I can have greater than hopefully influencing 100 or 1 million people who maybe eventually, you know, read this book or in any different ways to pull them up and influence the world that way.
Well, Mike, I think on behalf of all of us at Holy Cross, I say thanks for giving us hope, for lifting us up, for being a true man for others. And with others, I think is important to say that too. There's a lot of questions in the chat. I know in Q&A. I'm sorry I didn't get to all of them as we go through this, but I do think we all have a chance right now to sort of make a difference in a small way by just, you know, by supporting you and supporting your endeavor, supporting the nation, supporting Holy Cross. But I say thanks for everything you've done for me personally. You know, a couple of months ago, or a couple of years ago, so this was now, sitting in the living room, I was blessed to have my boys, you know, stand here, and I said to them, "You're standing in the presence of a great American hero." I feel the same way now, Mike. I really do, and you've shown a lot of us a great way to live and a great way to be a leader. So I'll let Chris and Maura sort of wrap up from here, but I say thanks for taking the time. I know you're going to do it again. I know you're going to do some stuff with some younger alums with the Leadership Council as well. So I look forward to doing this in person at some point, and I say thanks for tonight.
No, let me be the one who thanks everybody here. I couldn't pay attention to the chat at all, so I apologize if there's anything in the chat that's particularly relevant. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mike Hayes, like VMware, or Mike Hayes Seal will pull me. But look, I really appreciate support with the book, the Amazon reviews or whatever. It's because for me, it's so much more than a mission. It's so analogous to me to the People for Others cause, and I just love that we have the opportunities to come together and be inspired by you know, Chris and Maura who pull this community together and look, let's all serve each other. That's what it's all about.
Well, thanks, thanks, Billy and Mike. And, you know, I just have a couple of comments to wrap up here. And one of them is, you know, we were supposed to be talking about what it's like to be a math major at Holy Cross, Mike, and you had to go up, off on all that other stuff. I mean, I guess it was interesting, I guess, but I mean, no, I mean, seriously, in all seriousness, that was fantastic. Billy did a great job. I wish you guys didn't know each other and like each other so much, because it really gets in the way of us watching. But I really appreciate what you've done, Mike. Thank you for your service. The takeaways from this thing are incredible. I encourage everybody to read the book. They got a little bit of a tease in there for a lot of great stories in the book, a lot of great tie-ins to Holy Cross. So thank you both very much for participating tonight and doing a great job. And Maura, you want to close us out?
Yes, I just want to echo Chris, say thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mike, for sharing your story so openly with all of us. And thank you, Chris, for being here to serve as our host. And thank you for being here, everyone who's still listening on this call. As I mentioned at the beginning, this has been recorded and we'll share it with everyone in a few days once it's been fully produced. It has been a pleasure to have you with us here tonight. I hope that you feel inspired and energized, as Mike said, to make a difference and inspire others to make a difference. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.